In the spirit of reconciliation, the ASEA acknowledges the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea and community. We pay our respect to their elders past and present and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples today. Tonight's event is sponsored by our new insurance provider, Praden. Thank you, Sam, for contribution this evening, and the ASEA and its members. Our event overview tonight is starting out just with a short update by myself, and then we've got Sam Giorgatzis from Praden, Julia Collins from ASEA, and we're missing obviously Anna's name on there.
It's like, don't worry about that.
Don't worry about the regulator. No. And obviously we've got some questions and some networking. Prior to our speakers tonight, we would like to take this opportunity to provide some information to those who may be new to the AHCA and a spotlight on some of the AHCA's industry, committee, agency and community involvement. Additionally, we'll touch upon the working groups, both underway and proposed. The Asbestos and Hazardous Materials Consultants Association is an association for industry professionals within the asbestos and hazardous materials community. Our aim is to drive and encourage best practice through consultation and knowledge sharing. To do so, the ASEA aims to be a focal point for members seeking advice and assistance with relevant queries, to provide an opportunity for members to cooperate with each other, share experiences and technical understanding. It's also aimed to be an avenue for independent technical guidance and training for members and community where gaps exist, to provide assistance for members where difficulties may arise, and to provide a single entity capable of donating resources or funds to charities, organisations or associations from time to time. The AHCA is an active member of several committees, agencies and communities. It's an active member of the Demolition and Asbestos Consultative Committee and regularly provides input to a number of committees, agencies and campaigns, including the Asbestos Safety and Eradication Agency, New South Wales Environment Protection Authority, Asbestos Awareness Campaign and Standards Australia. In the next few slides, I'll touch briefly on the involvement of the AHCA with three of the above, the DAC, Standards Australia and ASEA. And that was too big a press. The ASEA meets regularly with members of the Demolition and Asbestos Consultative Committee. At each meeting, the AHCA and other members have an opportunity to provide details of activities and request assistance from members or request actions from the DAC. It is proposed going forward from tonight that actions items and or a summary of each meeting be summarised and provided directly to our members. Key items from the March 2023 meeting. Demolition licensing regulations commenced on the 1st of March 2023, and I encourage everyone to please visit the SafeWork New South Wales website for further information. The non-destructive digging and use of vacuum trucks research project is progressing, and SafeWork New South Wales have submitted a request for funding to develop an asbestos awareness course that complies with the requirements under Clause 445 of the WHS legislation 2017. Standards Australia. So since mid-2022, the ASCA is engaged as a nominating organisation. By participating in Standards Australia's standards development activities, nominating organisations have an opportunity to represent the interests of their industry and have input into Australian standards and other technical documents. Nominating organisations are a key component of the standards development process. The ASCA is represented by Dean Gleeson as he actively is involved in the review of the AS2601. The AHCA is also actively involved in ASEA and welcomes each opportunity to canvass members for input into important national documentation. For example, the AHCA have provided input to guidelines for asbestos cement water and sewer pipe management, guidelines for communicating about asbestos risk, and most recently, the draft National Guide for Asbestos Surveys. If you would like any information about any of the activities that the AHCA is involved with, please reach out to admin ahca.org.au, and we'll get back to you as quickly as we possibly can. In regards to working groups, we have 2 existing working groups underway: the Asbestos and Soil Working Group and the Lead in Paint and Dust Working Group. Now, the Asbestos and Soil Working Group includes members of ALGA and NADA and is observed by ASEA and SafeWork New South Wales. Some of the example activities of the ASBINS group includes collaboration with ASEA on guidelines for asbestos cement water and sewer pipe management, issued a review of the WA guidelines for assessment, remediation and management of asbestos contaminated sites, and also provided a review of the SafeWork New South Wales updated document for managing asbestos in or on soil guidance. The ASBINS working group has also provided a WA guidelines webinar in 2021 and provided input to the New South Wales EPA asbestos newsouthwales.gov.au website. The AHCA has also developed a lead paint and dust working group to look at addressing a consistent approach to undated Australian standards, a consistent approach to lead paint and dust risk assessments and removal processes, and the management of lead containing paint and dust waste. The lead paint and dust working group is presently in the early stages of developing a code of practice for the management of lead paint and dust. If you'd like to be involved, please also contact admin@ahca.org.au. Future working groups. The AHCA is requesting expression of interest from members to join new working groups that have been put forward by canvassing our members recently. Ideas have been put forward for the following working groups: asbestos clearances and natural disasters. And I believe we have members of Public Works that would like to be involved with the natural disasters working group. We're just looking for some other members of the communities to sort of get involved. All members are welcome to be involved in the working groups, and we'd like to encourage those that are interested to reach out also by contacting the admin at ahca.org.au. Our future events. We've got our workings underway for our networking event in June 2023. And as you can see, we're very dynamic, and we've got something good and something else that's going to be even better in the pipework after that. So to start off tonight, the AHCA has recently selected Praden Insurance Broking and Advisories as the AHCA's exclusive insurance partner and sponsor. Sam Giorgatzis is the Managing Director of Praden and is presenting here this evening with the aim to talk through what Praden can offer to the AHCA and its members, and to take any questions that members may have tonight and following this event. Please welcome Sam here tonight.
Thank you. That officially makes me something good, and then the next speakers are going to be something even better, I think, this evening. I'd like to thank the committee for welcoming us as a sponsor, and very much looking forward to meeting all members. I've met some of you this evening. I'm joined today by colleagues Leanne Murphy and Olivia Taylor, sat over there, just to deflect some attention. And my name's Sam Giorgatzis. So just going to run a brief presentation just to talk you through what Praden's all about, talk a bit about how we think we can assist in the short term, and then just run through briefly some of the items we discussed with the committee about how we can add value in the future as well. So a bit of an introduction. We're insurance brokers and advisors, got a broad industry and product knowledge. We do understand your sector. I don't profess to understand your sector as well as you do, but we understand it well in the insurance and risk management context. And indeed, a number of AHCA's members are our clients, and we're very fortunate to have them as clients. Market leverage is a term that insurance brokers use. It relates to buying power. We're part of Steadfast, which is Australia's largest general insurance broker. So we do have that leverage and can use it when needed. We believe in open market engagement. Those of you that have had exposure to the insurance industry would have dealt with people that have preferred insurers or where they're dealing in single products. What we tend to do is look at the client, their specific business, and we will partner with insurers with that client based on their needs. So even though we have a number of clients in your sector, they're not all with the same insurer. They're not all on the same wordings. Each one is negotiated on its merits. And we're one of very few brokers that are fee-based in our remuneration. So we don't take commission. We remove the commission from the premium drops, and then we charge a fee. So at the moment, that's actually quite a financial benefit to clients because insurance premiums are increasing. So it's probably a very poor business decision to take that approach, but we're very strong leaders in doing the right thing and being transparent, and it's a big part of our differentiator. And in terms of our service offering, so operational insurances basically means insurances that you renew on an annual basis. So professional indemnity, public liability, and so on. Site-specific and project-specific insurances. So I'm not sure if you've come across this, but we can work with specific contaminated sites and so on to do things like environmental impairment liability. It's quite unusual in terms of being purchased, but cost cap type cover as well. And so on and so forth. Contract works if you're dealing, if you're a subcontractor on a large project and you need to take insurance that sometimes is contractually mandated, but you don't need if you're looking at it from a pure business standpoint. And we believe we're quite good at articulating that to insurers and making sure that you're not having to pay for that. Well, you'll have to pay for it, but not as much as otherwise would. We provide services around transfer of risk. And we have a dedicated private clients team, so it's not all business. We can also assist with personal insurances, and that's where Leanne comes into it. She heads up that area. So some details on what we'll be doing and where we're hoping to add some value in the short term. Presentations. Today's presentation is not really informative. We're not providing a, we're not talking on a particular topic, but moving forward, we'll be talking with the committee about topics that members would like to hear about from an insurance standpoint. So, that could be running through a case study involving a particularly complex professional indemnity claim and talking about the lessons learned, and topics of that nature, how to manage insurance renewals, how to put yourself in the best position so that you're not just having to wear a premium increase and not actually understand why, and so on and so forth. We'll be providing articles and reference guides along the same rationale, and we'll be inputting when invited and when we think we can add value into working groups. Complementary services to members. So this is a commitment we've made to the committee as part of our sponsorship. So a health check or an insurance program review. We do this on occasion for other clients, but for other clients, it's generally on the basis that, if we find something, there's an obligation to appoint Praden as their broker. Our commitment to the ASEA is that if members want a second pair of eyes over their insurance program, there is no obligation to then move. It's just an appraisal of what you have, an assessment and some recommendations if we think we can, if we think there's merit for you improving something, and we're happy to do that. Sounding board. Best way to explain what that is an example. So we did provide a service of this nature to someone else. They had a member who was told by their broker that they needed to purchase a separate policy of insurance to comply with a specific head contractor's requirements. We were able to help them negotiate with said head contractor and to convince their broker that they didn't actually need a separate policy. So it saved them having to take out a different policy. So it's just a second opinion. If someone tells you something that you don't think quite sits right, you can run that by us, and we're happy to provide you with an opinion. And then reviews on the personal insurance side as well. Floods and bushfires and so on in Australia have had a particular effect on house insurance and all the rest of it. So if you're struggling in that space, that's somewhere we can assist. And promotion of the ASEA brand. And what we mean there is, we're not doing any direct marketing or SEO and so on and so forth. But this is part of our longer term, I guess, vision from our standpoint is if we continue, we're looking to continue to attend, learn about this association and what you're doing, and then trying to articulate that to insurers and let them see that, if it's a member of the ASEA that's actually wanting to purchase insurance from them, it means something in a practical sense. It means that they're involved in an association that shares knowledge and so on, and as a result has an improved risk profile. So that's kind of the medium longer term aim there. More information on our website. So those arrows are in the wrong place, but ultimately it's the address at the top. And if you can't see it, it's Praden, praden.com.au, and you just have to click on partnerships and schemes. And there's already a landing page there for asbestos and hazardous materials consultants. So looking to the future, some of the things we'd love to be able to help with and deliver value through. Exclusive offerings. So that's about scale, frankly, as we become more and more aware of the member base and so on. We're hoping that translates to an ability to go to insurers and say, well, X amount of people, is there a way we can offer a discounted product, a better coverage, a streamlined renewal process, whatever it may be, and try to be able to put something together. Furthering the ASEA's aim to drive and encourage best practice, and that's just about sharing information from our side. So, if there's a claim and there's a lesson learned, we'll put that in a reference guide or an article or a newsletter and share that with the member base. Obviously observing confidentiality if it is existing clients and so on, but so that everybody can sort of learn from the same lesson. And your feedback's welcome. So, whether it's tonight, whether it's a call or an email separately, if there's a particular topic you think you'd like to hear about or any information you have, I'd urge you to give myself a call or to talk to one of my colleagues as well. And that's it, short and sharp. So that's Praden. We are very much looking forward to sponsoring and continuing to partner with the ASEA. Happy to kick off today, and hoping to meet you all over the course of the following 12 months. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sam. I think we're going to be definitely looking forward to some of those case studies being presented at a future date and having the opportunity for the health checks. And I think maybe also for me, that one point of contact in regards to discussing other insurances that basically fall by the wayside as we get through our day in the personal space. So having one organisation, one point of contact, yourself and your team, basically, I think will provide our members quite a significant benefit. We've got next up for this evening, we've got Julia Collins, and Julia is the Director of Research, Data and Policy at the Asbestos Safety and Eradication Agency, and has travelled from Canberra to be here with us this evening to share those details relating to the development of a new national guide for asbestos surveys. ASEA is developing a national guide for asbestos surveys to address the need for a robust and consistent standard for conducting asbestos inspections or surveys in the built environment, including in residential and non-residential premises. This guide will be the first of its kind for Australia. It will provide comprehensive information on the steps involved in identifying the presence and location of asbestos-containing materials and assessing the risk that the ACMs present, so that effective actions can be taken to prevent exposure to airborne asbestos fibres. Please welcome Julia.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you very much to the AHCA for inviting me here tonight. I have to say the white wine is really good, and I wish I'd actually had a look on that until after my presentation. But that was worth travelling down for. So anyway, we'll see how this goes. So the achieving consistency in asbestos identification and assessment actually started with the development of our first national strategic plan. So that ran from 2014 to 2018. And in that, it said that one of the strategic actions was to review current practices with the aim of developing a model, what they call grading system, for the condition of ACMs. And in our second, the current strategic plan, we've got priority 2, which is about asbestos identification and effective legacy management. And a strategic action under that is identifying and promoting robust models for identifying and grading asbestos-containing materials. So that's really basically where the remit for this work comes from that we're doing. So just to go back to the research that we did starting back in 2014. So we started developing some criteria and a sort of a checklist to evaluate 4 pre-selected asbestos identification assessment tools that we found assessors were using. One of the problems we had throughout this research is that it was very difficult to actually get companies who were doing surveys to share what they were using with us because they felt, intellectual property. So we really had only 4 that we were able to look at. And we did a sort of a criteria around what sort of makes a good assessment tool. And it was things like, having applicability to different workplaces, prompting consultation and involvement of stakeholders in the risk assessment process, and also to obviously enable decision-making on control measures for ACMs. And then in 2015, so all these research studies sort of followed on from each other. In 2015, we reviewed the tools that asbestos assessors and comparable jurisdictions were using. And then we tested 4 tools with 27 assessors. And in 2016, then based on that, there was some work done on developing some guidelines for the visual identification and grading of in situ asbestos. And in 2017, there was some testing of that draft guidance, those draft guidance documents. But some of the findings that we had in that process was definitely that there was a need to improve consistency and the quality of surveys. But assessors were sceptical of the value of having a tool, and they certainly didn't want to have anything mandated. They thought the tools were considered as not being able to cover all situations, or they encouraged lazy thinking. And everyone agreed that the use of any tool, it must be supplemented by assessor knowledge and experience. And in the absence of any consistent accreditation or quality standard for reports of asbestos assessors, there was a feeling that there should be a guide for duty holders at least to commission these surveys that informs them, when they commission surveyors, and that they actually do get good quality surveys undertaken. And there was also finding that we need more definitive guidance on friability. Risk categories should be simple and concise. So, low, medium, high, very high, colour-coded, make it easy for people to make decisions. Assessors should be encouraged to specify control actions whenever a risk is identified and develop a standardised framework for that. Also encourage voluntary accreditation of assessors and provide guidance of what should be included in the survey report. So what that led to then in 2018 was a couple of guides that ASEA developed in collaboration with the Victorian Asbestos Safety and Eradication Agency, and we published these in 2018. So there were 2 guides. One was information for those undertaking asbestos assessments, and the other one was for those who arrange asbestos assessments, so the clients or the people who commission them. But what we found is really that these guides really weren't being used. So they're not detailed enough, they weren't promoted well. And whenever we would talk to surveyors, assessors, they would always mention the UK HSE Asbestos Survey Guide, HSG 264, that was really, the go-to document. So in the meantime, the Victorian Asbestos Eradication Agency did some further research because they have a program where they consolidated all the asbestos registers for all the Victorian government-owned buildings, and there's over 1,000 of them, so about 1,200 buildings, into a comprehensive ACM database. And they wanted to get a consistent model that they could then use for their prioritisation, so for their removal program, to have a really consistent risk assessment model. So they carried out some further research on the international models that we use, including the UK and in Ireland and in Austria. And there wasn't really one model that they could adopt. So they developed a new model, which is the one that I've shown up here, which has got 4 risk factors. They're given a percentage weighting based on that contributory risk, and then they determine an overall score. So you'll see they've got ACM friability and condition, which is in the UK survey guide is that material assessment component. And then the disturbance potential and the building factors are the priority assessment component in the UK survey guide. This model takes a precautionary approach, so it attributes a numeric value to all the risk factors as there's no safe level of exposure to asbestos. So rather than attributing a 0 score to some risk factors, and it also gives a higher risk weighting where an ACM item and its conditional disturbance potential are assessed as unknown. But you'll see it's quite a detailed model. So in that friability scale, there are 10 levels of friability, and within each of those factors, they have sort of further divided up the risk assessment. But they've been using this now successfully for a few years. So we thought, we should really, I suppose, from a starting point, look at working from the basis of this model. One of the things compared to other models that you'll see, it doesn't include surface treatment and type of asbestos fibres because the workplace registers do not require this information. So that's not sort of part of the assessment. So in September last year, we thought we really need to do some work on developing a national guide based on the UK survey guide. We established the Asbestos Assessments Working Group, and you can see we've got representation there from the AHCA and also the AIOH and FAMANS. And I must say this working group, as well as the regulators, it's been just fabulous. We're getting really good input from them. And we've already developed a first draft of the guide. So it really is aimed at providing a nationally recommended, robust and consistent standard for conducting asbestos surveys in the built environment. So it's for both workplaces and non-workplaces, unlike the UK survey guide is very workplace focused. And it's really aiming at describing how to identify the presence and location, and also how to assess the risk. We're also developing a complementary ACM product guide. So what that will have is photos and descriptions of over 100 ACMs. We will develop as a sort of an online resource that will really help, I think, not just surveyors, but also people, the general public really, when they want to, see what this stuff looks like. And I think for this product guide, we always find problems sometimes sourcing photos of materials. So we'll definitely be coming to the AHCA, to help develop that guide and help make it a really useful resource for people conducting surveys. The survey guide does not include air monitoring and clearance inspections required for asbestos removal work, and also doesn't cover assessment of contaminated soil because those are really sort of specialised areas and, there's separate guidance for that. So the guide is not just for surveyors who do the inspections of surveys, but it's also aimed at those who commission the surveys, those who have duties under work health and safety laws, building professionals, workers, but also persons who design software for asbestos registers, because we know that, a lot of those software systems are also quite inconsistent. So it would be good if the consistent terminology that's in the National Guide could be picked up by those software designers as well. When we were first developing the guide, we thought, that maybe it is, having this sort of target audience, these different audiences for one document, whether we should maybe split it up, but there was a view that it's important even for these people who commission surveys to really understand the whole process so that they can really, engage surveyors who do the job properly and they know what to expect. And it may be that once we've got the guide developed that we can do separate fact sheets. We can break it up a bit more easily once it's been developed. But that's basically the content you can see there of the first draft. So we've been working with the working group on that. And as I said, very much modelled on the UK survey guide. Some of the key issues that we've been discussing in the working group is terminology. So making sure we've got consistent understanding of how we're describing things. What makes an asbestos surveyor competent, and I'll talk a bit more about that. The types of asbestos surveys, sampling strategies, particularly for bulk sampling on, how many samples you take, and how ACM risk should be assessed. So we sent out a first draft to the working group. We got really good feedback. And one of the key issues that we spent a lot of time discussing is competency. So as you may know, in the work health and safety regulations, competency for doing surveys or in identifying ACMs is someone who has the knowledge and skills to carry out the task acquired through training, a qualification or experience. And everybody hates that definition, including the regulators. And in my work health and safety sort of policy experience, which goes back 20 years, whenever we wanted to define competency, it's always been a vexed issue. Because when you try and become a bit more specific and you want to, prescribe courses, then you start getting arguments, people saying, oh, well, what is the right course? And it really always becomes, a really difficult issue. So then, you revert back to this generic definition and it just actually doesn't help anybody. So we sort of had discussions and we were quite amazed in our agency. We didn't actually realise that there wasn't a training course for surveyors. We always thought, oh, licensed asbestos assessors, they could do it, occupational hygienists. But the feedback was quite firm from everybody saying, well, licensed asbestos assessors, that's not included in the licensing and also in the training that they get to identify ACMs and do the surveys. And occupational hygienists as well. Not all occupational hygienists do have those competencies. So the BOHS, the British Occupational Hygiene Society course, was the one that everyone mentioned, well, that's the one that people do. And of course, it's a British course. And people say that, there are a couple of companies in Australia who do the course, but then when you sit the exam, you're actually doing the British exam. And that's sometimes where it gets a little bit tricky because it's sort of not Australianised. So we really think there's a big gap here in relation to training, but in the absence of something being developed for Australia, the BOHS course is really the one that people do. So for the purposes of this guide, we're sort of saying, there's got to be training plus experience. You need to have some on the job experience with a trained surveyor. And accreditation was also mentioned as something that's necessary, that's ideal. So, either being a full member of AOH or FAMANS or an equivalent professional body, or, if you're employed by a NATA accredited company and authorised by them to undertake asbestos surveys. So at this stage, this is sort of how we're going to say, well, this is, if someone's looking for a competent surveyor, these are the things that they need to look for. And certainly, this is something we'll be looking for further feedback on. In terms of the survey process, this is just a snapshot of sort of a summary, really, of what's in the draft guide. One of the key things that we got feedback on was the asbestos register, because the work health and safety laws don't require a competent person to prepare the asbestos register. And we know that there are lots of problems with, poor quality registers. And the feedback we got again from the working group was, well, actually the surveyor should be doing the asbestos register and the asbestos management plan. So even though, that the duty is still on the PCBU or the person with management control of the building or the workplace to ensure that actions are taken. And to make sure that those registers are obviously developed. But really, to get a good quality register, you probably need to have the surveyor do those. So that's, again, something, we'll take on board. Types of surveys, we had comments on that. So there's the two key types, the two key surveys, the management survey and the demolition or refurbishment survey. So we've divided up the management survey into the identification survey, which is that initial survey that you would do. which then can also be something that you would use for a pre-purchase of a property, which we want to encourage. And then, of course, the review surveys, which are carried out at regular intervals to monitor the condition of previously identified or assumed ACMs. In terms of the risk factors, so as I mentioned before, the VAA has got 4 risk factors. The feedback from the working group was that that was too complicated and they really wanted a much simpler risk assessment process. So we are working with the VAA at the moment, and fortunately they've agreed to work with us to actually simplify their risk model to have 3 risk factors. So their building rating and disturbance potential really just becomes disturbance potential. So 1 factor there. Friability, instead of maybe a 10 scale friability scale, we might look at a slightly, I don't know, 5 scale friability level. And then ACM condition. One of the things that was agreed was it's no longer a good idea to call asbestos condition or ACMs in good, because they're all deteriorating, they're all becoming old, you know, they're past their use by date. So really stable was seen as a much better descriptor. And of course, there'll be much more description in the guide about these. Unknown is only used when ACM is inaccessible. So where to from here? We're busy revising the draft survey guide and the ACM product guide. As I said, the VAA is actually just doing a test run of a simplified risk assessment model. It's really good having them on board because they've got all these buildings that they can actually run their model against and all the data that they've got. So they are going to present a simplified version. We'll release the draft guide for public comment. We want to road test the survey guide. And then once it's agreed, we'll publish and promote. But we also then would like to develop some sort of app or software based on the guide and the algorithm that's in it. And hopefully surveyors and assessors will, it'll be widely used, and definitely support development of a training course and industry accreditation for this. So that's my presentation. Thank you.
And the AHCA and everyone here would like to commend ASEA and the VAA for taking this initiative. It's going to be, it's no doubt a very, very important document, and I think everybody will be looking very much forward to seeing that final document come out for public comment. And I think nationally, hopefully you'll get a lot of feedback. And no doubt, hopefully after that road test, that you get a very robust document that we can all utilise in practice.
Absolutely, it'll be great.
Next opportunities. Any direct questions that you'd like to ask Julia, or she's here tonight?
Questions. Sorry, then you sat down. That's for the Sydney water here. We're updating our risk management software, including asbestos and hazardous materials registers. We're very keen to know the time frame for the finalised algorithm.
Yes, well, we were hoping to have something by the middle of the year, but I think it might actually extend into the second half of the year, but definitely before the end of the year, we want to have this guide finished. So our public comment process will probably be around May, June. So really definitely want to get as many people, contribute to that public comment process, but you should get an idea then of what that might look like. And then we'll finish the guide in the second half of the year.
There seems to be an overemphasis on risk assessment. 2012 fundamental change in the WHS legislation that's about management and control. Yet we spend a lot of time on risk assessment. During this process, was there a thought about changing the algorithm to a control-based algorithm? So rather than looking at the risk and looking at the predictors of risk, because it's a very poor model, inefficient model, because it tends to be more about gold sat, the good old boys sitting around the table. This algorithm should be good, and its spaceability, which is a lot of the HSG 248, because it doesn't really predict the outcome of any measurable risk, and the only measurable risk is really fires in the air. It doesn't predict that. So it's not a very good model. when we're trying to, and then communicate risk as well. So I guess a question for 2 parts when we get to it, which is about whether the model has been validated through proper validation, statistics and the outcome, and the efficiency of that. But also, was it considered to look at a control and management, like control banding algorithm? So we just get to what needs to be done to control this, rather than spend all this time and effort in creating what is risk and nothing ever gets done to control.
Well, the VAEA was the purpose they developed their model was particularly to prioritise what they needed to do with their asbestos so that they could get government money to remove it. So it was about removing a prioritisation of removal. And they did do validation of that model, so that model that they're using has been validated. And we are really trying to, so our guide will also include, well, if you get this outcome, these are the controls that should be applied. So it's going to, but it, you know, it's not, we still have to, I suppose, discuss that. But they did look at the control banding approach that's used overseas as well. So I think this does go to that. Because that's really what we want. We want a decision. We want this to result in, yeah, a decision at the end, not just, oh, that's the risk and, you know, you don't need to do anything.
So the outcome decisions about.
Yeah, the VAEA one is, yeah, we want to move to removal. We really think that, you know, that it's time now that we start thinking about removing this stuff from the environment, and instead of just managing it continuously. So, but the model will include, you know, the risk levels and then what you need to do if your risk is low, high, medium.
I guess some of the harm that can come from that is also if the decision, the outcome is in the context of removal priority, and we have high, and then someone then looks at that and says high, they might interpret it as a high risk of getting mesothelioma.
Oh yeah, I see what you're saying. No,
So
yeah, yes,
logical impact.
yes, yeah, that's
context in how that information is.
yes. We have to balance that very carefully. Exactly. Yeah. We're very cognizant of that issue. Yeah.
Damien from Melbourne, you to address yesterday. You were talking about the courses like BOHS courses for that to acknowledge that people are trained and competent and that sort of stuff. Is this going to be made mandatory?
No. It's at the moment it'll just be guidance, recommended national guidance.
Yeah, does that mean like companies aren't going to spend the money on training people if they don't have to, whereas in the UK,
yeah, well, SafeWork Australia is reviewing the competent person definition at the moment. So we're working quite closely with SafeWork Australia to get them to sort of align with whatever's coming out of this, that they can then, you know, make amendments to the model laws to actually strengthen that competent person definition, so that in the, you know, that hopefully we get a much clearer definition of who is competent. So yeah, so they are working with us on that review, but that sort of falls within SafeWork Australia's remit to do that review of the competent person issue. But yeah, we'll need amendments to the model laws for that to happen.
And next up tonight, we've got Anna Dawson from SafeWork New South Wales. Again, apologise about that earlier slide. Anna Dawson is an assistant state inspector in the specialist psychological health and safety team of SafeWork New South Wales. Anna is an organisational psychologist with substantial experience in workplace wellbeing. Anna is a fellow of the College of Organisational Psychologists and member of Australian Psychological Society. Anna is focused on delivering effective solutions to assist organisations with designing work environments that promote good mental health and fosters positive staff experiences. This evening, Anna is presenting on the legislative requirements for businesses and workers to manage psychosocial risks in the workplace with the aim to help ASEA members understand how the amended WHS regulation applies to managing psychological health and safety in the workplace.
Okay, I guess I don't have to introduce myself. I'll move on to the next slide, the important slide. So I'd like to begin by acknowledging the Gamaragal people, the traditional owners of this land that we meet today, and pay my respect to the elders past and present. I also want to extend that respect to any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people here today. So just a brief overview of what we do at SafeWork. As inspectors, we have two roles. One is to educate and train business owners and workers around the legislation side of things, and also to enforce act enforcement and ensure compliance of the legislation. So that's, I guess, part of our role in terms of building capability of our customers and our clients in work health and safety. So you might be quite familiar with the legislative framework. I will speak specifically relating to psychological health and safety. So we've got the Work Health and Safety Act. So under the definition of health, that includes psychological health. And we've got the regulation, the amended regulation came in to effect in October last year, which includes the management of psychosocial risk in the workplace. There's also the Code of Practice that came out in May 2021, and that provides, I guess, a bit more clarity in terms of what we expect from businesses in terms of ensuring psychological health and safety in the workplace. Now that we've got both the regulation to support us in the Code of Practice, we're going, around educating many people about what that actually looks like, and providing from a, I guess, case scenario, which is what I'll be doing today. Okay, so you might be quite familiar with, I guess, different strategies to manage or to create mentally healthy workplaces. There's the prevention approach, promotion, and recovery. I'll start with recovery because that's traditionally the way where most people are familiar with it, which is around the return to work side of things, reducing stigma, offering EAP type of services. Then there's the promotion side of things, which is about, training to promote capabilities around how do you actually support mentally healthy teams or create mentally healthy teams. And that's, I guess, there's more introductions around a peer support network, flexible working environment, flexible working policies as well to support that kind of working environment. But where SafeWork really wants to aim at is the preventative side of things. And what that means is looking at the core issues. So what are some of the workplace factors that are contributing to that poor working environment that has an impact on the psychological state of the workers? So we really want to be able to prevent any of these issues from happening and be able to change at that work organizational level. Leadership is really important in that space. So what actually is communicated at the top, what's being role modeled, and how policies and procedures are designed to support that behaviour in the workplace. And that's, I guess, part of our role in educating, people like you about, from a work health and safety perspective, it's about looking at that leadership behaviours and what would some people traditionally call it the HR side of things. Okay, so you might be quite familiar with the risk management approach. We spoke about in the last presentation as well, but another, just want to, I guess, familiarise you to the different, process involved in that. Our Code of Practice emphasise this risk management approach to managing psychological health and safety. So what I'm going to go through over the next few slides is what is communicated in our Code of Practice. I'm hoping that using a scenario that I'll share with you a bit later on will make it a bit more familiar and in a practical sense. So you can actually see how it can be applied in practice. Okay, so here's the scenario. I'm not sure whether you can see it, but I'll read it out. So you are the owner of a small consulting firm. You have a small team of consultants who provide various health and safety services, such as occupational hygiene, technical assessments, and hazardous materials and building audits. At a recent team meeting, the following issues were identified. Staff feeling overwhelmed by the workload and the unpredictable times to respond to issues. So, for example, responding to school asbestos response. Inspections are quite routine and repetitive. Your consultants have not been able to, influence on many matters that they responded to, despite informing the client that a hazard exists, the risk is significant, and urgent action is needed. Wearing significant PPE can cause stress for some of the staff, which were raised at this team meeting. Some also mentioned about feeling isolated due to working in trenches, subfloors, ceiling spaces to help identify some of the issues. And there's also conflicting priorities set by clients as well. So this scenario is pretty much a mix of various kind of matters that come to SafeWork. So hopefully it is familiar to you. It is quite complex. I'm seeing some notes. And I think it's quite real in that in the industry that you work in. So we're going to unpack that a bit further on. So you're going to start with identifying. So, part of the first step of your risk management approach. So what is, what psychosocial hazards? The regulation actually defines that for us, which is quite broad, but also from our perspective, quite specific, because it actually outlines that these hazards can arise or relates to either the design or management of work, the working environment itself. So in this particular case, working with hazardous materials. There's also could also relate to the plants or structures in the workplace. And the fourth one is around workplace interactions and behaviours, which I think most people are quite familiar with. Traditionally, when you think about psychosocial risk, people tend to think about bullying and harassment or workplace interpersonal conflicts. But the regulation actually defines that, psychosocial risk can arise from either of these factors. And these hazards can lead to psychological and physical harm as well. Okay, so going back to the scenario, what I've done here is, outline what are the psychosocial hazards that came out of that team meeting in the scenario. There's many ways to identify psychosocial hazard. One way is through the team meeting, but other ways could be through surveys, looking at HR data, looking at trends, and your reporting system from a WHS perspective. So any incidents or, through your risk registers. But going back to the scenario, what we've identified is that there's role overload, so high job demand. But not only that, there's role underload, which is around the repetitive nature of the work. So even though it's all routine kind of, inspections that the workers are doing, it can be a bit mundane and boring, and, you're seeing the same kind of issues over and over again. So that can also contribute to psychological harm. There's low job control, so not being able to have that agency in how how you can impact the outcome of some of the assessments that can cause psychological harm. Then there's the hazardous physical work environment, remote or isolated work, and finally, potential for role conflict around the conflicting priorities. So, when you're consulting, you're probably managing a few clients going on at the same time. So how do you actually manage the work priorities from that side of things? Okay, so step 2 in that risk management approach is to assess the risk. So you've identified what the hazards are. Now it's really to understand the impact it has on your workforce and your people. So you might, sure you're familiar with the risk management approach. You must implement control measures that eliminate the psychosocial risk so far as is reasonably practicable. And if it's not, then you must minimise the risk so far as is reasonably practicable. Now we understand that you can't always eliminate it because things change, context change as well. But it's about, making the right decision and making sure you get enough information to assist you with making that decision, to go through that decision process to ensure that you have minimized it as much as you can. To assess the risk, and this is actually in the regulation itself, you need to consider the duration, frequency, and severity of the harm. So what that means is, in terms of frequency, so questions that you might need to consider is how often are the issues occurring? Are they occurring on a daily basis, weekly, monthly? Are there peaks and troughs in terms of when workload comes in and high demand? And how long does the exposure last? So what that is, sure, there's, you've got high workload, but does that, I guess, continue for the full day? Is it high pressure work for, for that one day, or are there breaks in between that day? Then you look at the consequence of the harm exposure. So consider what is the degree of harm, so it's severity, and which work group will be impacted as well. And also, some questions to ask is around, well, depending on the impact on the individual, do they have the support network, or this team, the support network, to help manage that? So these are some of the questions that we would expect businesses to consider, to consult with the workers. So, consultation is really important. And so it's about facilitating that conversation with the team to assess the risk. Managing risk is through good work design. I know it might sound a bit technical around work design, but it's really about how, how work and the job itself is arranged. Relying on administrative controls, which is actually, I have to say, what we see quite common, and we want to change that. Administrative controls are more around, ensuring there's policies and procedures, there's training, and when we do respond to matters, we do find that most organisations have policies and procedures. However, whether they actually implement it in practice, what that actually looks like in practice is very different from what they have in the policy. So we want to be able to be realistic and go, well, given that's the case, what can you do actually at that organisational or that team level to redesign the work so that, any harm can be minimised. Okay, so the control measures, step 3 of the risk management approach. And I'll outline what we have here in the regulation because from our perspective, it is quite clear what you need to go through to help you with making that decisions. The first 2, what I've highlighted in red, is the risk management, assessing the risk, sorry. The next 2, the bottom 2, so this is clause 55D. I guess the first thing to consider is the design of work and the job demands and task. So what that specifically means is about considering whether if the work performed matches the capabilities and the capacities of your workers. Are you recruiting the right people to do the job? Is the environment fit for purpose for the work to be completed safely as well? The other things to consider is the systems of work, which is around the workplace practices, and that goes back to the policies and procedures, and whether they actually support a safe working environment. The next one to consider under the regulation is the physical design and the layout of the working environment. I know it might sound simple, but from a psychological perspective, is there easy access to, entry and exit? We recently completed a program in the hospital where we work with, we ask questions with health workers, and one of the things we look at is the physical environment of when they are with clients. Is there easy access to leave that room in the event of any, if they're exposed to, like, say, violence, for example. And that's something, I guess, to consider from your perspective as well, with consultants, how do you ensure that your workers are safe when they are out and about on client sites? What's the environmental conditions like? Another part to consider is around the planned substances and structures at the workplace. And I think this is quite a key point given the type of work that you're in, and the substances that you're exposed to as well. I think someone here mentioned earlier that, there are the inherent psychological risk, especially if you can't see, say, asbestos, in terms of exposure. How do you know, whether it's going to impact on your health or not? I've spoken to someone recently who works in radiation. It's something that you can't see, but, do you have trust in the system that is, ensuring your own personal safety from that side of things? So these are something I feel like hasn't really been captured in the past, but the regulation has brought that to the forefront and ensure, workers and business understand that, some clarity around that. Then the last two is around the workplace interaction. So is it a respectful working environment? Are there leadership support, team support? One of our priorities at SafeWork is the Respect at Work task force. So focusing specifically on sexual harassment in the workplace. So that kind of ties in with that aspect as well. So it's not just about, I guess, bullying, harassment, but other aspects of harassment and discrimination. Then there's the information training. So workers provided with the right amount of training to do the job. Are they the right person to perform the task as well? Earlier today, I spoke to someone here about recruiting the right person for the job that's for them to do. You need to have the right job fit. And if that's not the case, then how do you ensure that they are capable and they've got the capabilities to perform the role productively, but also safely as well. Okay, so that was the regulation. Now we'll go back to the case scenario. For this particular one scenario, some of the, I guess, questions to consider is, is it possible to redesign the work? So, for example, to reduce a sense of isolation, is it possible to work in pairs or to work in teams? And that way there's, there's, I guess, rotation of task to give that a bit of variety, and also tag team as well, like being able to reach out for support. Because the sense of isolation, it's not just having the one person going there, but like, can they contact someone? Is there easy access, like a phone call away to a manager who will be able to respond straight away? If they've got some questions they need to ask. Another thing to consider, how are the roles and responsibilities? How can they be improved? So going back to the points from the case scenario around meeting urgent calls and urgent requirements, so the school asbestos response. Is it possible to roster, a group of consultants who can clear their day so that they have that mental capacity to dedicate to these urgent response if they do arise? Because, I guess sometimes, there's this kind of conflicting priorities of, well, I've got, 3 reports I need to write today. I can't, respond to an urgent call. But if it's possible to redesign the team where only, a couple of people are rostered in, so they actually are prepared and can clear their day so that they can prioritize some of these work. Another control measure to consider is around setting realistic work targets as well. So think about having, if you've got new consultants, they're still learning, they're still trying to understand the process that's required for them on the job. So their KPI might be slightly different to someone who's a bit more experienced and be able to perform the task quickly as well. So these are some of the things that we believe, would be quite effective control measures. And again, it's about consulting with your workers about understanding what will work for them and how can you actually apply the right strategies to assist them. current training and support. So how sufficient are they? Is it time to review the training? Is it still fit for purpose? Has there been updates to the process where the training materials need to be updated as well? I did a training a session recently where they have updated their practice management system, but no training were provided. So it was just expected that people were able to kind of navigate through that. And that caused a lot of, I guess, stress, as you can imagine, and also errors as well. So that was, I guess, an interesting point, even though it wasn't relating to, I guess, some might consider it to be traditional psychosocial risk, but actually working on the actual IT system brought on stress for some workers. I guess other measures can be put in place to support those who experience high level stress as a result of wearing, significant PPE as part of your job. There are, likely to be some individual differences, and it's about, ensuring you're working specifically and tailoring the strategies to that individual. So what we would describe that is, I guess, reasonable workplace adjustment to enable them to be able to perform the task, the role itself. Another thing that I haven't mentioned, which was on the previous slide, is around automation. So that's quite, I think, quite common. Like, most businesses are implementing automated process to reduce some of the, I guess, mundane kind of repetitive task, but sometimes introducing these practices might bring on new psychosocial risk as well. So that's something to consider when we are, I guess, looking at control risk. Whenever you're introducing something new, consider applying the risk management approach again to identify what kind of new hazards and risk are presented. And that's actually a good segue to the monitor and review part of the risk management approach. When we respond to matters, we feel this is the part that seems to be missing or can be improved. It's about ensuring the control measures that you initially implemented is still effective and fit for purpose. Looking for opportunities for improvement as well. And also, as mentioned before, it's about whenever there's a significant organizational change, consider the risk management approach again to see what new risk are presented. And you can do that through many ways, through team meetings, through one-on-one discussions. But in order for your workforce or your staff to feel comfortable with sharing any feedback, it's about creating an environment that's built on trust and psychological safety. So what that means is that, your workers want to be able to see that information that's shared with you, that actions will be taken and that they trust that things will improve. We think that's quite an important part, but also quite challenging sometimes to implement. But having, I guess, applying this systematic approach, it is demonstrating that, and through consultation as well, it's demonstrating, the first step to creating a psychologically healthy and safe work environment. So we've got quite a number of different resources to support businesses in meeting compliance. I won't go into too much detail, but I do want to draw your attention to the surveys that we have that's freely available to everyone. So you might be familiar with the People Work Survey, which is a risk assessment tool. All regulators across Australia, they've adopted this tool, and so we're really promoting it as one way to really understand your risk profile in the workplace. The last two, the workplace pulse check and the workplace wellbeing assessment, it is looking specifically around the maturity of your workplace in creating mentally healthy environments. It's different to the People Work Survey because it's not a risk assessment tool, but it gives you some benchmark to understand where the gaps are. So whether that is to focus more on leadership or focus more on culture, or maybe improvement in your risk management process. So that will give you an idea how you benchmark with other similar organisations. And finally, we have the mental health training. So there's quite a number of, depending on the size of your business and the eligibility requirements, there's free mental health training and coaching to help you set up the right system. The training is through Black Dog Institute, and the coaching is with a consultant firm with organizational psychologists. And essentially, you know, you can ask them to help you with finding the right tools. So it's, you know, it's a coaching model to help you create the first step in building that framework for your workplace. And finally, these are the three key links, which I'll share. I'll share the slides with Jason so that can be distributed as well, which directs you to the specific acts and regulation and copy of our code of practice, and also the mental health at work resources as well. Okay, so that's it from me. Thank you so much, and thank you to AHC.
Thank you, Anna, for that presentation. No doubt it's an incredibly important topic that needs to further focus from ourselves and all our members. And as discussed, we'll aim to get your presentation plus a copy of the Code of Practice, which came out in May 2021, and the appropriate contact details, if you can, for any of our members who may need to reach out to your agency for further advice, especially in regards to implementing the relevant codes and guides.
Yep.
If anybody's got any questions for Anna, yes.
I was just wondering, what are the triggers? Because I'm thinking, is this organizational point of view, so all organizations should start thinking about this straight away, or should we focus more in a project point of view, or should we focus more? Is it, for example, the case study, was it a complaint that come through, concerns? What is the trigger here? What's the level of that we need to start thinking about what's the bigger picture, and then when we can zoom in? I'm just trying to understand how does that plan out.
Yeah, so the trigger, the first step is it is part of your work health and safety obligations, one under the Act. And now there's further clarity under the regulation. So my recommendation is to go back and review your current process to see how you identify psychosocial risk, and what you're doing in terms of the control measures. So it's a good question because, you know, it's a common question as well. So where we see it is that it's no different to managing physical risk at all. And really you should be looking at both psychological risk, physical risk, environmental risk, or under the one health and safety management system. Two is, since we've released the code of practice and now with the regulation, there's more public awareness from workers around what their rights are in the workplace. So yes, we are receiving more, requests for service or complaints from workers, and we do go out to respond to these from an enforcement and compliance perspective. So that's one of the reasons why we're out and about and providing similar kind of sessions just to educate businesses around that it's under your legal obligations now. You know, those, you know, when you're looking at work health and safety, you need to consider psychosocial risk as well. Yeah, does that answer your question?
Well, yes, I think I need to, but like, no, you were quite clear. I think because it brings a lot of perspective in what's being done and what is done, if there's any gaps.
Yeah, and look, we're in the process of producing materials to support small businesses in how to manage that. I'm not sure when the release date will be, but there's plenty of resources like guidance material from SafeWork Australia. We've got the coaching program, was what I mentioned. So if you're eligible, then that could be a nice first step to really go, well, where do I start from here?
Very interesting, thank you.
Any other questions? Happy to answer them. Hi.
I've got an interesting one left field here.
Oh, okay.
To see whether a waste treatment facility could be subject to prosecution under some psychological harm in the following circumstance. So this removal of material from refurbishment.
Yep.
On a building that's built 1994. They take said material to the waste facility. The waste facility gets a laser gun and says, "There's asbestos here." And so they get sent back with the material, and now the whole school knows that this is a school where now parents know that this material has then been taken back because the waste facility says that's asbestos there. And they're using equipment that hasn't been accredited by NADA, that follows WHS regulations, and now they're introducing psychological harm. This is a true story. That happened not too long ago.
Are you going to say that waste facility has a license to identify the asbestos?
Well, there is no license. There's no license to identify asbestos.
There's a requirement to be a NADA accredited lab approved by the regulator,
All the regulations.
etc. Or the regulator, etc. So those laser guns are not what SafeWork New South Wales would recommend or even contemplate using as a measure to identify asbestos.
So there's now psychological harm as a result of that.
But it doesn't matter if it is affiliated, just that harm is done psychologically for the people that were aware of potential asbestos on site.
It's a difficult question.
Would they be subject to prosecution? Under
Can't
the
answer that
circumstances,
question. I can't answer that
because it now introduces psychological harm to the community in response to misidentifying or misclassifying material. So this communication in benefits versus harm is also.
So how-
Also, in many instances, I'll just finish this a little bit. In many instances, we
Yeah.
like to have this overly conservative approach, which in itself can bring about psychological harm.
So before you answer that, I guess the first thing is, once now that you understand that there is potential for psychosocial risk, then I have identified it, you need to assess and go through the risk management approach. So that's where I guess we'll come from, but my learned friend here might share more information.
Contrary to popular belief, SafeWork New South Wales does not prosecute every single case of psychological risk or asbestos risk or everything like that.
Could they be subject?
Could they be subject to? Absolutely. There's section 19, which is the PCBU requirements. There's controller of premises requirements, etc., that if they met the public interest test, etc., then SafeWork might give it a run. But I think that one would probably not proceed to prosecution. Because of a number of elements requiring to be proven to progress that to a formal matter before the district or local courts.
Perhaps in prohibition notice.
It would probably be an improvement notice. Prohibition notices are issued due to immediate risks or something that will involve immediate risk, and they stop a work activity providing that immediate risk. Improvement notices identify hazards and risks that will or may occur and require directions for remediation.
But could that psychological harm be an immediate risk? Just food for thought.
It could be, but that's up to the individual inspector to assess.
Yeah, I think you're overthinking.
A reasonable belief. I'm not overthinking it. That's the answer.
But once the possibility of harm being identified is what Anna says, it's about what you do next that is the important thing.
Not necessarily, because it's also the admission of not having assessed it properly or identified.
But everybody,
You're overthinking it.
yeah.
Conversation about it. Sorry.
I'd like to wrap up following Carl with the question. I've been waiting 40 years for stuff to come out from the 83 legislation. This is a piece of insight and legislation and practice that we need to get on board with as organisations throughout the country. In that, I've done heaps of investigation, either as a work cover inspector or as a private going investigator, to say that probably 70% to 80% of accidents out there are originating from some sort of psychosocial issue. And it is a forerunner for most of our so-called safety issues that we define in one day. So thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you, Richard. Thank you, Anna. Thank you, Anna. Thank you, everybody, for attending tonight.